Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Whiskey Uncorked. My name is Brian, and we're back with another review today. This time we're looking at a budget bottle, an affordable whiskey, and this time it is actually still affordable here in the US, unlike a couple of the other budget bottles I've talked about here on the channel. The price here is still really good, and I am talking about none other than the Maclean's Nose from Adelphi. So this one is kind of rounding out a bit of a trio of whiskeys that came out around about the same time. And they all dropped here at almost exactly the same time here in the US, at least in my area. And those three whiskeys would be the Thompson Brothers, TBBSW, their SRV5, and of course the Maclean's Nose. Now, I've already reviewed the first two bottles I mentioned, the two Thompson Brothers. I gave them both a 7 out of 10, enjoyed them very much. I liked the blended Scotch actually a little bit more, although I had tasted the SRV5 before, and I think that it was better than from that bottle. Maybe it was a different batch, not sure. But anyways, I thought I liked the blended Scotch a little bit better. And my one complaint with those two bottles was that they came out here in the States, or at least here at K&L, at $55. And they should have been much closer to the $35, $40-ish range. And that's before tax even. And because that would have put them much more in line, I think, with what they were, and much more in line with what they cost over in the UK and in other areas of the world. So although we are used to paying a bit of a premium here in the US, it's usually not too bad. But those bottles, the Thompson Brothers bottles, I think were coming out kind of at that 30, 32 pound range, if I remember correctly, in the UK, which would put them at about $40 bottles. So if it was a 1-to-1 conversion, coming out at $55 kind of was stretching that tolerance a little bit. And they have been that same price up until very recently. I'm referring to K&L Wines here, where they did go on sale down to $40 or $42 plus tax, which is really where I think where they should be. We'll see if those bottles are able to stay there at that price, but I have to imagine that they were having trouble selling them at that $55 price point, and they admitted they had to drop the price on them, even if they're taking a loss. I'm not sure if it was their choice to charge that much or not, but I actually did pay about $55 or so for this one as well. However, that price has since come down, where the regular price is now $35. And that $35 plus tax puts it right in line with what people in the UK are paying, like 28 to 32 pounds or something like that. So very, very competitive. Basically a 1-to-1 exchange rate there. So when I talk about value and everything, I will be looking at this as a $35 bottle. It's a fantastic deal. It's 46% non-chill filtered and natural color. And we can learn a little bit more about the bottle thanks to the QR code on the back. All right, so let's see what we got. I did take a look at this already, but I'll just read it straight from the source. And it does give you some more information. So let's see here. This bottle is made up of 40x bourbon, American standard barrels of malt whiskey distilled in the West Highlands. We know that it being Adelphi, that almost certainly definitely means that it is Ardnamurchan. Let's see, we also have 5x bourbon American standard barrel of malt whiskey distilled in Campbelltown from 2016. The West Highlands whiskey was 2018. And the Campbelltown, which is certainly Glen Scotia, that is from 2016. And we got 16x sherry hogsheads of malt whiskey distilled in the West Highlands in 2018. Again, Ardnamurchan certainly. And 21x bourbon hogsheads of grain whiskey distilled in the Lowlands in 2017. Probably North British, but at least I believe that's what I read somewhere online. I don't know if the source was super reliable, but yeah, a lowland distillery, lowland grain distillery. It also, kind of does some math for you there. And then it says Maclean's Nose has a very high malt content of 70%. So 70% malt whiskey and only 30% of that grain whiskey, which with a lot of the standard blends these days, those numbers may very well be completely flipped around. So doing some quick math there, that probably should put this whiskey, the whiskey in this bottle at kind of that 4 to 6 year age range, 4 to 6 years, which makes it a pretty young product, which is okay because it's cheap and it's well presented and it's transparent and we're getting all the things that we really want. Of course, that being said, I have to kind of look at my own personal preferences, and typically when things are still in that 6 year age range, I'm pretty picky about those. Not that I don't like some of them or I can't absolutely fall in love with them, but typically that 6 years or younger is really, the youth is usually pretty evident, and it's really going to come down to whether the blender can work some magic with some cast to kind of sand off those young, grainy, ethanol-y type edges that we can often find, or at least that I often find in some of these younger products. But I can say right off the bat that I have been enjoying this bottle. There's some things about it that I really like. There's some nitpicks here and there. There's probably some personal preference things in here, but there's some really nice flavors going on in here. And as I mentioned already, we certainly can't be complaining about the value that we're getting for the presentation, the transparency, and just the overall quality. Okay, let's not waste any more time and let's get into the nose and the palate and give this thing a score. Here we go. All right, so the first thing that always hits me on this whiskey, and really from a lot of Ardnamurchans and just maybe west coast of Scotland, whiskeys from the west coast of Scotland, is the minerality. There's big time, like some people say, well, like wet rocks and that sort of thing, but really spring water, mineral water, it just has that heavy, gravelly sort of smell. And that's common on a lot of these whiskeys, even Talisker 10, although I picked that a little bit more up on the palate than the nose. There is some peat here. It's pretty lightly peated. I think there's some other dirtier things that even like that kind of, that mineralic quality can kind of almost trick you into thinking that maybe it's a little bit more peated than it is. It is kind of a dirty whiskey overall, but the peat is earthy, more on the mushroom side, less so medicinal, less so Isla. You can kind of get some chocolate and some farminess even. A couple times, like when I'm like pulling away from the glass, I can almost get a whiff of a little bit of manure. And yeah, definitely funky on the nose overall. There is a touch of grain. There is a little bit of youth, a little bit of sharpness from the ethanol, even after this has been sitting out for probably at least half an hour now. Not too bad right now, but it's a little bit sharper right off the bat. So overall in the nose, I haven't been fully in love with the nose, to be honest with you. There's some really interesting things. There's some things that I absolutely love. There's things that are exciting. Like anytime you get farminess on a whiskey, it's like that really kind of gets me excited. Just because typically leading onto the palate, like obviously farmy is notoriously a note that's notoriously associated with Brora, right? We're not talking Brora here, but there are definitely some challenging notes here, which is exciting, particularly from a young whiskey. I think the nose is a little inconsistent. Sometimes after I take a sip, the nose really seems to kind of fall apart, and that just doesn't really hold up as well. There is some youth, and you can argue that being a young whiskey, it's maybe not as well integrated as maybe something with a few more years in the barrel. There's something about it, maybe a little too mineralic for my personal preferences, but let's get into the palate where I think this whiskey really does tend to shine. Cheers. I say pretty average mouthfeel, pretty solid for a young whiskey, right? Sometimes, unless it's got super heavy cask influence from a sherry cask, sometimes they can come off a little bit thin. This one is pretty decent. It's not fantastic or anything like that, but for a young whiskey, it's solid. Up front, there's some grassiness and some nice caramel or even toffee. Might even lean towards toffee today. And then when you swallow, it's building into that mineralic earthiness, into a finish that has some flavors that makes me say, yep, there's definitely some Glen Scotia in here. because I get that chocolate, malty nougat, and some caramel candy bar quality that comes out on the finish. Once that dies off, then some of the youth comes in, like usual, some dry grain, maybe just a touch of bitterness from that. But generally speaking, the flavors in this, it's a nice transition from kind of the front of the palate to the back into the finish. And there's some really interesting flavors. We're going to go in for a second sip and see if I can articulate a couple more of those. Yeah, I would say like the first 3/4 of that whiskey it's pretty good. You get a little bit of the youth throughout. There is a little bit of that just grain Scotch, a young Scotch. I'm not talking about the grain whiskey that was in here. I just mean like young Scotch whiskey, where just the grain aspect of it is poking through. But you get the minerality. Not as much, not getting any of the farminess on the palate, which is okay. It's really coming in as a richness, like I said, that candy bar, especially on the finish, with some mushrooms, again, mineral water, and just kind of grassy with a drying sensation towards the end. It's a really nice, well put together whiskey, to be honest with you, and it's complex in a young kind of sprightly way, I guess is the way to put it, a very spirited way, pun intended. And there's some challenging aspects to this as well. I don't think everyone's gonna like this whiskey, which is kind of surprising that generally speaking, at least online, the praise of this has been pretty widespread. Not many people, at least raising their hands that I've seen, coming out and saying that they don't like this one. But if you are a fan of kind of funkier, dirtier whiskeys, this is going to be right up your alley. If you love Campbelltown Lock, this is going to be right up your alley. If you're a Springbank fan, Ben Romick fan, and obviously Ardnamurchan fan, this is not going to be a massive depart. This is going to fit right in there as an affordable option to all of those. Not that those distilleries don't have affordable options. Ben Romick's very affordable. Ardnamurchan is now pretty easy to get these days. And their standard offering is very affordable. And on Springbank, if you can find it, they've kept their prices affordable as well. But this is not going to be available everywhere, at least not here in the States. If you can track one down, I don't think you're going to be disappointed, provided you know that you like a little bit more brash, challenging whiskeys, and you're not looking for something that's going to be a complete and total sherry bomb, or something that's going to be light, sweet, grassy. So for a score, I know I haven't reviewed Campbelltown Lock on this channel. I will at some point. I have a bottle of it. It was one of the first bottles to hit here in the States. I grabbed it immediately. And to be honest, I haven't really been a huge fan of it. It's one of the more lightly colored bottles. I think they have more sherry. I was going to mention that about this. I think the sherry casks in here were very well used. I think they helped rein in some of the youthfulness and help. I think sherry casks do a really good job with young whiskey of helping kind of sand the edges off, as I think is what I'm trying to say. But yeah, that first bottle of Campbelltown Lock, I just haven't really loved it. And I'm a massive Springbank fan. I'm a massive Glen Scotia fan, and that just didn't do it for me. So I'm pretty close to finishing that bottle off, and I'll try to grab something a little bit more contemporary to see if maybe some of the newer editions are a little bit more up my alley. But this to me is kind of what I was hoping that bottle of Campbelltown Lock was going to be for me. This is fantastic. So for a score, I gave the two Thompson Brother bottles a 7 out of 10. I think this is probably right in line with those. In terms of an everyday drinker, I think the blended Scotch, the TB BSW, probably still be my first go-to. And then depending on the style that I was looking for, the SRV5 and the Maclean's Nose are going to be kind of right there as a close kind of second choice. Just because this isn't, I don't drink Springbank every day. So this is definitely one of those when I'm in the mood for something heavier, a little dirtier, and just gonna make me think a little bit more. So 7 out of 10, very good, another 7 out of 10. I think that's really kind of, I guess it's not surprising, right? A 7 out of 10 is where, like, hey, these are whiskeys I really like. That's where they start, and then they go up there. The 5s and 6s are still good whiskeys, but maybe just things that I don't think about as much. So obviously, in terms of value, this is kind of a no-brainer. This is the easiest easiest bottle I've probably talked about here on this channel in terms of value. For $35, you're getting something that is, it's not mass market. It's high quality. It's transparent. It's well presented, perfectly presented, really. And outside of its youthful nature, which, again, what do you expect for the price? You're going to get some youth in there. There's nothing to complain about here. I don't know if everyone will love this bottle. If you are looking for something that's a little bit easier to drink, you're looking for a beginner style whiskey, this might be a little deceiving, being $35 sitting on the same shelf as your Johnny Walkers and your Chivas Brothers and your Dewars and all those sorts of things. But you might be in for a surprise if you bought this blind and didn't know what you were going to get. But fantastic value for enthusiasts who know what they like, and a fantastic value for enthusiasts who are looking to maybe expand their palate a little bit and drink something a little bit different if you're not normally kind of in that realm of dirtier, funkier, heavier whiskeys. So yeah, I don't think there's anything else I can say about Maclean's Nose. Adelphi knocked this one out of the park. Great things continue to come out of Ardnamurchan. More and more of these great whiskeys, these blends, who are adding a little bit of Glen Scotia into the mix. Chef's kiss, because it does add enough of its character to really, I think, round out the profile here. And yeah, there's not much else to say about this one. So I think I'll just wrap it up. Thank you all again. The last couple videos have been great. Lefroy Karchis video did even better than I expected it to. Great response to that one. And even last week's Clynelish 14 bottle. Little nervous always putting out a video of a much-loved bottle with maybe a not-so-great score. I hope, people actually watch it and listen to why. But, man, you guys had great responses, great conversation. Sorry it took me a little while to kind of get back into the comments. I'm trying to get a little bit better at that. Middle of the summer, definitely started slacking, but we're coming back up on whiskey season. Your brain will be locked in a little bit more. And yeah, there will be more. Next week, we'll be back with another review. Please leave a like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what you think of these blends, specifically Maclean's Nose, if you've been able to try it. And yeah, we'll talk to you all again next week. Cheers.